challenge to the rest of the world in 1967 was not an expression of arrogance. It symbolized far more. It was an assertion of self-confidence and self-belief, and it was a rejection of self-doubt. Barely 5 months earlier, this country had gained political independence from Great Britain, and that singular action was an announcement to the world that we were possessed of that self-confidence and competencies that would enable us to manage our affairs for ourselves. The game was also an expression of our confidence in being able to stand as equals in cricket with the other nations of the world. Lack of size, lack of wealth, and lack of power notwithstanding. In a real way, we acted out that confidence inspired by the words of the national anthem, which constantly remind us that we had no doubts or fears. In the summer of the previous year, 1966, the West Indies touring party, including 9 Barbadians, went to England. And as a parting gift to the mother country, prior to Barbados' independence on the 30th of November, we handed the English a 3-love defeat. West Indies' comprehensive superiority caused the English selectors to appoint 3 different captains for one series. That summer of West Indian cricketing success in England really belonged to the incomparable Right Honourable, Right Excellent Sir Garfield Sobers and the irresistible Seymour MacDonald Nurse. Seymour demonstrated his class and stature as a world-class batsman during the tour to England in 1966. He amassed a total of 501 runs in the test matches, second only to Sir Gary's 722. And in that series, just as Barbados was announcing its readiness to take its place among the nations of the world, in similar manner, Seymour proved his readiness to be acclaimed among the top batsmen in the world. The Bible of Cricket, Wisden, named him among the top 5 cricketers of the year in its 1967 edition. It was axiomatic that Seymour should have been accorded such a renowned accolade. He began the series at Old Trafford with 49, but in each of the succeeding tests, he made scores in excess of 50. 64 at Lord's, 93 and 53 at Trent Bridge, 137 at Headingley, and 70 at the Oval. 1966 was his annus mirabilis. Seymour MacDonald Nurse was born on the 10th of November 1933 at Wavell Avenue, Blackrock, into a working-class family that, like so many of the time, was poor, peaceful, polite, and proud. Seymour had one other brother and 2 sisters. He was born at a time when social and economic conditions for the majority black population were dire. The decade of the 1940s began to fulfill the earlier political promises of better times, but such betterment was relative. Seymour did not have the opportunity for a secondary education. He left elementary school at St. Stephen's and looked for work. For a time, he was a tally clerk at the wharf. Growing up in Barbados in the 40s and 50s, there was no television, no televised cricket from which to learn techniques and style through visualization. For the majority, there was Barbados rediffusion, and for some more fortunate, there was a wireless radio or radiogram made by Philips, Grundig, or Lopin. We boys were obliged to make our own forms of recreation, and those were cricket and football in that order. All of us, Seymour included, learned the basics of batting and bowling mainly by observation of the best players around, through discussion, and through unceasing practice. It seems that as early as age 12 or 13, Seymour displayed a prodigious talent for cricket. Sir Garfield says that Seymour played alongside himself and his brother Gerald for the boys' club at Bay Street, and Gerald and Seymour scored a lot of runs consistently. As he got older, Seymour played BCL cricket, where his prolific scoring commanded attention. So Everton saw him, liked what he saw, and got him membership in Empire Club. He scored heavily for Empire in the local BCA competition. But as indicated by Mr. King, he loved the camaraderie and environment at Empire. Although he had close friends such as the Greenwiches at Carlton and Peter Lashley and George Rock at Spartan. After joining Empire, as we heard, Seymour represented the club both in cricket and in football. And if Mr. King was loath to mention the club against which Seymour scored, according to my record, 6, but according to Mr. King's memory, 7 goals, I have no hesitation in letting you know that the club was Carlton.
Amazing Grace, how sweet the song. Begins one of the best loved hymns in all times, a staple in almost every denomination. The words to this well-known hymn were written by John Newton, once a slave trader, who, like most of us, heard of God from his mother. And like most of us, he heard his moment of really experiencing God's saving grace. He came during the raging sea, a wonderful storm, and he asked God to let him have his mercy of his soul. And by God's amazing grace, which is the enabled power of God in action, Newton wrote these words that he loved so much. And they are the same words we too can boast in Christ when we sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the song that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, and now I see. And this is just what we do when we Christians are boasting about, whether we come before the Holy God, praising him for his amazing grace. Sir David, Mr. Riley, Mr. King, Mr. Haynes, they all got it right about Castle. Seymour Nurse was called Castle by all members of the team because he was a marathon runner that Seymour spoke of so eloquently every day of the tour. Seymour was my inner circle friend, and a very special one too. Off the field, he is quiet, friendly, and unflappable. On the field, he was disciplined with a brilliant work ethic, good manners, compassionate with dignity, that few of us can even conceive the manner in which a gifted spirit moves. He was a fertile amalgam of the young and brilliant. Seymour had a proclivity for comedic expressions. I have to stop sometimes just to get the blood flowing, so don't hold on. Don't worry. We know he knew that failure was not a cataclysmic event, so he practiced very hard to correct his faults. And in the 1960s, only Sir Gary and Kenai were rated above him in my book. He was creative, competitive, and he adapted brilliantly to the changing conditions in world cricket. My friend Casso, my friend Seymour MacDonald Nurse, spent his last conscious moments on earth talking to God. What a wonderful thing to do, talking to God and thanking him for his grace and mercy. He acknowledged that it was indeed God's grace and mercy that sustained him throughout his life. And then he said to the Lord, "And Lord, I thank you for the unbiding love that my twin daughters, Sherilyn and Roseanne, has given me. Traveling to Barbados 5 and 6 times a year just to see their father. Oh, I just thank God. I thank God for Seymour. Oh, yes. It is time, and I want now to say one last thing to Roseanne and Sherilyn, young reader of the gospel, Sherwin, and all of the Nurse family from Jackman and Gap. I just wish to say to all of you that when my son died 10 years ago, having traveled from Toronto to Barbados, and after 2 hours in the island, he died at the beach. I want to say to you that I was discombobulated. I could not move. I did not know. It isn't to say that I do not know that God is so merciful. It isn't that I don't know that Psalm 34 says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivered them all. It isn't that I didn't know that. But I felt just as badly as I have done in this last 2 weeks when 5 of my inner circle have gone to the great beyond. So I just wish to say to you these last words. They're not words that originally are results. Indeed, I was reading one of about 200 letters that people have written to me over my son's death. And this one came from Tony Marshall. And when I read it 10 times because I couldn't believe it. And now I am giving these words to you two wonderful girls and this great family. And it said, just think, in times like these, when our strong Christian faith, our integrity and belief in God becomes bulwarks to the buttress against the sorrow that abides in our hearts. Unlike Priam weeping in futile agony at the death of Hector, knowing that there is a solace in the arms of Jesus, and that when the night is past, the brilliant dawn will appear. And so, to you, Casso, as you lie in your deep silence, I just want you to know that we love you. We'll always love you. We thank Lord for your magnificent contribution. Go to the plan that God has for you. A plan holier than any prophet can describe. A plan greater than the best minds can describe, and richer than human language can explore. Rest in peace, Casso, and rise in glory. Thank you.
The Reverend
kindly